On my daughter's birthday, my mother erased her from her own party just to put my sister at the center of everything. Walking into that party, I honestly thought the worst thing that could go wrong was the cake being late. I was worried about the candles, about whether my daughter would like the dress I bought instead of the one she had sent me in a link, about if the playlist would work on the speakers in that rented room. Normal mom stuff. I definitely did not expect to open the door and realize my 21st birthday girl had been deleted from her own party, like she was some kind of typo my family decided to backspace. I had booked that room weeks earlier for my daughter, but my mother had insisted on helping with setup that afternoon, since I was still picking up last-minute things with my daughter. The staff knew her, knew she was my mother, and assumed she was there for the same event. By the time we arrived, she had already gotten into the room, swapped out the birthday decorations, and turned the whole thing into my sister's shower like it had been the plan all along. The first thing I saw was the color. That shade of soft baby pastel that screams new life and fresh beginnings, and all those cute little quotes people put on pictures of tiny socks. There were balloons everywhere, little booties hanging from the ceiling, a giant sign that said, "Welcome, little one," in huge letters, and not a single thing that mentioned my daughter or her birthday. For a second, my brain tried to rearrange the scene, like maybe there was another room where the actual party was. Maybe this was some mix-up. Maybe I was early and they were still decorating, but then I saw my mother standing in the middle of it all, smiling like she had just solved world peace. My sister was there too, of course, hand on her very pregnant stomach, soaking in every compliment like sunlight. People were hugging her, touching her belly without asking, laughing about how fast life moves and how blessed our family was. My daughter was standing off to the side next to the door, clutching the little gift bag we put together for her friends, the one that said 21, in glitter letters we glued on the kitchen table the night before. She looked like someone had picked her up and dropped her in the wrong movie. Nobody was looking at her. Nobody was saying happy birthday. They were all saying congratulations to my sister, thanking my mother for such a beautiful shower, asking when the baby was due. My mother spotted me and waved with that bright, practiced smile she uses when she knows someone is watching. She walked over like this was all totally normal and said, "You made it. Good. We were waiting on you." Like I was late to her show instead of staring at the corpse of my kid's birthday. When I opened my mouth, all I could manage at first was, "What is this?" Which sounded stupid even to my own ears because obviously I could see what it was. My mother tilted her head, all innocent, and said, "The shower, what else?" Everything lined up perfectly. I did not even have to change the date on the reservation. It is like the universe wanted this. Behind her, I could see my daughter's face fall in a way that is burned into my brain forever. She had put on makeup for this. She did her hair, which she almost never does. She bought a new dress on sale and asked me 3 times if it looked okay. I had told her yes every single time, because it did. It looked more than okay. She looked like the version of herself she barely lets the world see, and here she was, invisible. I wanted to scream. I also wanted to rip every pastel balloon off the wall and pop them with my bare hands. Instead, I took a breath that tasted like dust and frosting and said, "You knew this was her birthday party. You knew this room was reserved for her." My mother shrugged, like I had asked if she remembered to bring ice. "We talked about this. A baby is a blessing. A birthday happens every year. We have to prioritize what matters most. Anyway, she is young. She does not need all this. She will understand one day when she has kids of her own." She said it loudly, too, like she was already performing for the tiny crowd gathering around us. I swear I heard someone hum in agreement, as if she had just shared a wise life lesson and not stomped on her granddaughter's feelings in front of everyone. My daughter caught my eye for half a second, and I could see her lining her face with that numb expression she uses in family gatherings when my mother forgets she exists. Her shoulders were tight, her chin dropped just enough that only I would notice, and her hand kept twisting the handle of the gift bag until the paper started to tear. She mouthed, "It is fine," which somehow made it worse. I know her. "It is fine," from her usually means, "If I act like this does not hurt, maybe it will hurt less later when I am crying alone." So I did the only thing I could think of that did not involve setting something on fire. I pulled my phone out of my bag and stepped into the hallway, ignoring my mother calling my name. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone twice. I scrolled to the contact that still said "Old Boss," even though I had not worked for him in years, and hit call before I could overthink it. When he picked up and said my name, I almost cried with relief. I told him I was at the event hall. I told him what my mother had done. I told him my daughter was standing in a room celebrating a baby that was not even born yet on a day that was supposed to be hers. And I asked if there was any chance at all, that there was another space open tonight. He went quiet for a second, and I could hear him clicking something on a computer. Then he said, "There is a small room in the back. It is not fancy. It is usually for training sessions and corporate stuff. But I can have someone throw some tablecloths on and find you a cake if you are okay with something simple." I said I did not care if it was decorated with leftover seasonal napkins and a candle stuck in a muffin, as long as my daughter had something that was hers. I authorized whatever cost he mentioned without even listening properly. Yes, I know that was reckless. No, I do not regret it. I went back into the main room, where my mother was telling some aunt how amazing it was that everything had just fallen into place. She stopped mid-sentence and grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks when she saw me heading toward my daughter. "Where are you going?" she hissed through a smile. "You are not going to start drama here. This is a sacred moment." The audacity of calling this mess sacred almost made me laugh. I told her quietly that I needed my daughter for a minute and that she should keep enjoying her shower since she clearly wanted to. My mother tightened her grip and whispered, "Do not make me the villain in front of everyone. You always do this." I pulled my arm free and walked to my daughter. I whispered in her ear, "Come with me, okay? Trust me." Her eyes were glossy, but she nodded. She has always trusted me more than anyone, which is exactly why this whole thing cut so deep. We slipped out of the room while people were busy asking my sister if she had picked a name yet. Nobody even noticed us leaving, except my mother, who kept glancing at the door like she was trying to decide whether to follow or let us go. She chose her audience. The small room in the back looked exactly like what it was, a space where people sat in stiff chairs to watch boring presentations about policies and goals. The tables were plain, the chairs were ugly, and the walls were bare. There was a faint smell of coffee and cleaning supplies, but someone from the staff had moved quick. There were simple white cloths on the tables, a small stack of paper plates in the corner, and a round cake sitting in the middle of the main table with "Happy Birthday" written in shaky icing. There were candles, too, the kind you buy last minute at a store and hope for the best. My daughter froze in the doorway and covered her mouth with her hand. For a second, I thought maybe I had messed up, that this would feel like a sad consolation prize, like eating leftovers in the kitchen while everyone else had a feast. Then she turned to me with tears spilling down her face and said, "You did this? For me?" I wanted to say, "Of course, always." But my throat closed up. I just nodded. She walked into the room slowly, like she was afraid it would disappear if she moved too fast. I watched her run her fingers along the edge of the table, touch the candles, stare at the cake like it was some kind of miracle. It was not fancy, but it was hers. I called a few people quietly. My cousin, who always rolled her eyes at my mother's theatrics, my friend from work who my daughter liked, a couple of relatives who still remembered that my daughter existed as a separate person and not just the older sister. I explained quickly what was happening and told them they did not have to choose sides. But if they wanted to say happy birthday to my daughter, there was a room in the back. Some came, some did not. The ones who came brought awkward smiles and small jokes and hugs that lasted a little longer than usual. We sang happy birthday. My daughter blew out the candles and made a wish she would not tell me, but I could guess. I stood behind her with my hands on her shoulders and tried not to cry on her hair. Of course my mother found out. She always finds out. She walked into the room halfway through the cake, looked around at the plain walls and the mismatched plates, and somehow still made it about her. She did not burst into tears or apologize or even look a little ashamed. She crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and said, "So this is what we are doing now? Dividing the family?" Everyone went quiet. Forks hovered midair. My daughter shrank in her chair like she was 12 again. I felt something inside me snap that had been bending for decades. I stood up, which is something I had never really done with her, not like this. My voice shook, but I kept talking anyway. I told her this was not about division. This was about my daughter having her birthday acknowledged like any other person would want. I said out loud, in front of everyone, that she had erased her granddaughter from her own party. And that was not okay. My mother's eyes flashed that look I know too well, the one that says, "You are going to pay for this later." She said loudly, "You are disrespecting me in front of my own family, after everything I did for you." Same script as always. People shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else suddenly remembered they had to get going. My mother said, We will talk about this later, which in our family translates to, you will be punished for making me look bad. Then she stormed out, heels clicking, hand on her chest like she might faint from the weight of my ingratitude. My daughter watched her leave and whispered, "Thank you," which was the only thing that stopped me from following my mother to say every cruel truth I had stored up since childhood. The next morning, my phone looked like it had been possessed. Dozens of messages in the family group chat, private messages from aunts, cousins, people I barely talked to, all buzzing with outrage I apparently deserved. My mother had beat me to it, obviously. She had already told the story, her version of it at least. And in her version, I had crashed my sister's baby shower, dragged people away to some secret room, and humiliated her on a day that was supposed to be about new life. The language she used was dramatic, all about betrayal and division, and a daughter who never appreciated her sacrifices. Screenshots started coming in of what she had posted on a social media app. A picture of my sister holding her stomach, surrounded by pastel decorations, my mother's arm around her like she was the one carrying the baby. The caption went on and on about unconditional love, about family being everything, about how hard she had worked to make that day special, only to have jealousy and bitterness try to ruin it. She did not say my name, but she did not have to. People in the comments were saying things like, "You are such a strong mother," and "Do not let anyone steal your joy," and "Your daughter will come around eventually." They were all talking about me without knowing half the story. My aunts messaged me privately telling me I needed to apologize, for the sake of peace, for the baby, for the future of our family. One of them even used that awful line, "She will not be here forever." You know, like I was supposed to ignore decades of favoritism and manipulation because my mother might someday die. By the way, people love using death as a tool to guilt you into compliance. It is wild. My cousin, the one who had come to the little back room, sent me a voice note saying she understood why I did what I did, but she also did not want to get in the middle. I could hear the fear in her voice. My mother knows exactly how to make people afraid of being cut off from her version of family. A few days later, I sent my old boss a long message thanking him for saving that night. He replied that in all his years running that event hall, he had seen too many families ruin celebrations over ego, and he was glad he could help make one thing right. That small kindness from someone who barely knew us meant more than 100 half-hearted apologies from people who should have protected my daughter in the first place. Even my sister sent me a message. It was long and strangely neutral, full of phrases like, "I did not know about your plans. I thought it was just a family gathering," and "I did not want to hurt your daughter," and "I hope we can move past this for the sake of the baby." She never actually admitted that she knew the date, the reservation, the fact that my daughter was supposed to be celebrated that night. It was vague enough that she could wriggle out of responsibility if anyone showed the message to my mother. My daughter read it over my shoulder and said, "She is scared of her," which was true, but it also made me mad. Being scared does not excuse stepping on people for comfort. I went to work that day exhausted. I had barely slept. My daughter had cried herself hoarse in her room, and I had sat on the floor outside her door feeling useless. At my desk, my eyes started burning right away from the screen, and my stomach felt like I had swallowed a handful of rocks. I thought I could at least escape for a few hours in boring tasks and office gossip. But my mother had other plans. Around mid-morning, my manager called me into her office with that careful look people get when they are about to say something weird and do not know how you will react. She said, "I got a call from your mother this morning." My whole body went cold. I literally felt my palms sweat instantly. Apparently, my mother had decided that if she could not control me in the family group chat, she would try the next best thing, my paycheck. She had called my job, told my manager she was worried about my emotional state after a serious family conflict, and suggested I might need time off because I was not myself, and maybe not safe to be around clients. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. My manager looked uncomfortable and said she knew it was not really her business, but when a parent calls sounding scared, she had to at least check in. I explained in the calmest voice I could manage that my mother was using concern as a weapon and that I was fine to work. I could tell my manager believed me, but the fact that the call had happened at all felt like a violation. It did not stop there. My daughter's university reached out a couple of days later. Apparently, my mother had called them too, left some dramatic message with a counselor about her granddaughter being in the middle of a toxic situation at home and acting out because of me. My daughter got pulled aside after class by some well-meaning advisor who asked if everything was okay at home, if she felt safe, if she needed resources. My daughter wanted to sink through the floor. She had to explain the entire mess to a stranger just to convince them that the problem was not her. It was the woman calling every institution in our lives like some kind of emotional arsonist. At church, where my mother is basically treated like the patron saint of suffering mothers, people started coming up to me with those pitying eyes. They would say things like, "Your mother loves you so much. She is really worried." And, "Family is complicated, but you only get one mother." She had clearly already done her tour, telling the story with herself as the misunderstood victim and me as the cold, ungrateful daughter who could not put differences aside for the sake of the baby. She always leaves out the part where she lit the match. It was around that time that the other fun surprise showed up in my mailbox. Well, not exactly my mailbox at first, which was part of the problem. I started getting texts from companies about statements available for an account I did not remember opening. Then a bill showed up for a store card I was pretty sure I had never applied for, with purchases I definitely had not made. At first, I thought it was some random identity theft thing that happens when your information leaks somewhere online. I called the customer service line, sat through the usual maze of automated menus, and finally got a real person. They told me the card had been opened recently, in my name, with my social security number, and then casually mentioned that the mailing address on file was my mother's. That was when my brain did that slow, sinking thing again. I asked them to repeat the address. They did. It was my mother's house. I felt my hands go numb. I asked when the change of address had been submitted. They told me it had gone through right around the time all the family group chat drama started. I hung up with that forced polite thank you give to customer service people even when you want to scream, then called the post office. Turns out someone had requested that my mail be forwarded too. Not everything, but enough. Some bills, some official letters. Not enough to be obvious right away, just enough that certain things would slip through the cracks and make me look careless. I wish I could tell you I caught my mother red-handed, that there was camera footage of her filling out the forms or a signed document with her handwriting. There was not. It was all traces and hints and timing, the kind of thing that would make any lawyer say, "Well, we can suspect, but we cannot prove it." Meanwhile, I had late fees popping up on accounts I did not even know were being rerouted, and debt attached to my name for stuff I had never touched. My daughter sat with me one evening at the kitchen table as I tried to sort through everything, and she said quietly, "She wants everyone to think you are out of control, late on bills, unstable at work, unreliable as a mom." Hearing it out loud like that made my stomach twist. The text message from my sister that changed a lot of things came a few days later. It was short at first. "Can I come over?" No emoji, which is how I knew she was serious. I almost said no. I almost blocked her. Instead, I told her to come by when my daughter was at class, partly to protect my kid and partly because I did not want witnesses if I lost it. My sister showed up with her face pale and puffy, hair thrown up like she had been crying for hours. She stood in my doorway like she was on my front step when we were children and had broken something inside, waiting to see if I would cover for her. She sat at my table and stared at her hands for a long time before she said anything. Then she finally said, "Mom knew." Just those two words, like a confession she had rehearsed in her head all night. She said my mother had known for months that the hall was booked for my daughter's birthday, that she had seen the reservation email, that she had even talked about maybe doing something together, and then quietly shifted her plans into taking over the whole date. My sister admitted that when my mother suggested doing the shower that same night, she had hesitated for about half a second, and then said yes, because, and this is where she broke a little, for once I was going to be the center. She talked about growing up in the same house but a completely different universe. She said my mother always talked about her as the blessing, the miracle, the one who saved her from loneliness, while I was the one who made her a mother before she was ready. She admitted she had liked being the favorite, that she had liked how my mother bragged about her, posted pictures of her, bought her things, defended her, while I got the lectures and the guilt trips. She never questioned it much because why would she? Being the golden child feels good. It is a warm coat. It is also a trap, but you do not see that part until later. She said she had not wanted to know the details of my daughter's party, because if she knew, she could not pretend ignorance. She kept saying, "I did not know, not really," and then immediately correcting herself, "Okay, I kind of knew. I just did not want to think about it too hard." She admitted she had seen my daughter cry as a kid after some event my mother had ruined or overshadowed, and had walked away because she did not want to be in the middle. Now, pregnant with her own child, she suddenly realized she might be raising another kid inside this same mess, with my mother ready to repeat the pattern the moment the baby did not perform to her expectations. I listened, and I believed her, mostly. I also wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and ask why it took a baby inside her body to make her see what my daughter and I had been living all along. She asked me not to tell my mother what she had said because she was terrified of being cut off. She still lives near my mother. She still depends on her for money, for childcare promises, for approval. She keeps saying she will move out and set boundaries when things settle down, which is code for never. Before she left, she hugged me. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on the same side, at least for a moment. That moment did not last long. I wish it had. A couple of nights later, after a long day of dealing with banks and customer service and pretending to smile at work, I snapped. My phone kept lighting up with new messages in the family group chat. More comments under my mother's posts. More vague quotes about ungrateful children and mothers who suffer in silence. I felt my chest tighten, my hands tingle, that buzzing in my ears that means I am about to do something impulsive. I opened the group chat, took a deep breath, and wrote a message that was way too long to be healthy. I laid everything out. I wrote about my daughter's birthday. I wrote about the reservation, the decorations, how my mother had erased my kid from her own celebration. I mentioned the back room, the cake, the fact that some of them had been there and knew exactly what had happened. I wrote about the store card, the mail, the calls to my job, and my daughter's school. I even wrote that my sister had confirmed that my mother knew months in advance and had done it anyway. I did not name her, but everyone could connect the dots. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The chat went quiet for a minute, which felt like an hour. Then the replies started. Shock, obviously. But not the kind of shock that turns into, "Oh my God, we did not know, how could she do that?" No. It was more like, "How dare you air family business in here?" And, "This is not the place for this kind of talk." And, "You should not drag your sister into this." My mother replied with a long voice note where she cried loudly for effect, talked about how she had tried her best as a mother, how she sacrificed so much, how she could not believe her own daughter would accuse her of fraud and sabotage. She did not address a single specific thing I said. She did not deny it either. She just drowned everything in tears and guilt. My sister, the same sister who had sat at my table confessing everything, jumped into the chat too. She said she never said any of that I was twisting her words, that she had no idea about the reservation, that she was devastated to be used as a weapon against our mother in her time of joy. I felt my stomach drop as I watched her throw me under the bus to protect herself. My daughter sat next to me reading every message, and I could see her face hardening in real time. That was the night she stopped calling my grandmother for a long time. One by one, my relatives started sending me those final little messages that basically mean, "I am choosing the safer side." Some blocked me altogether. Others sent something like, "I love you, but I cannot be part of this drama," which is hilarious, because they have no problem being part of my mother's drama as long as she is the one telling the story. My mother took screenshots of my long message and sent them privately to a few people as proof that I was unhinged. She called the owner of the hall too, tried to pressure him into saying he had offered the extra room out of nowhere, and that I had insisted on creating a separate event. He, thankfully, is one of the few people who is not afraid of her. He texted me to let me know she had tried, which I appreciated more than he will ever know. After that explosion, the silence from my family was almost worse than the shouting had been, except for my father, who finally decided to show up again, like a ghost who remembered he used to live here. He called me one evening, his tone weirdly casual at first, asking about work, about my daughter, like maybe he could pretend the last decades of distance were a misunderstanding. Then he said he had seen the messages, that my mother was very upset, that things had gone too far. He said he wanted to give me some context, as if context would make any of this okay. He told me that when I was born, my mother had wanted something else. Not exactly a different gender, but a different life. She felt trapped, he said, too young, too overwhelmed, not ready. Apparently she had told him more than once that she wished she could have had a fresh start later. When my sister came along years after me, when things were more stable and she felt more in control, that baby became the symbol of the life she wished she had had all along. That was why, according to him, my sister became the favorite. He said it like it was tragic but understandable, like that made decades of unequal treatment into some kind of sad romance instead of what it really was: abuse. He also told me something I had not known about my graduation day. Apparently, when I was in high school and my big ceremony came around, my mother had called half the family that morning and told them there was some emergency with my sister, that she needed their help and they might not make it to the graduation on time. He said he had begged her to stop, that she had insisted my sister needed her, that it was not that big a deal if a few people missed my ceremony. A few turned into most. I remembered looking out at the seats and feeling that familiar hollow ache, but I had told myself people were busy, that it was just bad timing. Hearing that she had actually created a competing crisis for attention that day made me feel like I was chewing glass. He kept talking, saying he had always seen the difference, that he had tried in his own way to be there for me, that divorce had complicated things, that he did not want to fight with my mother. He used the word coward about himself, which honestly, I agreed with. Then he pivoted into the same script everyone else had been reading from. He said, "But she is still your mother. She has done a lot wrong, I know, but she is getting older. Do you really want things to stay like this if something happens to her?" He was asking me to fold, to swallow it all again, to be the bigger person, to go make peace with the woman who had turned my life into a series of carefully timed erasures. When I told him I was done, that I was not going to subject myself or my daughter to that anymore, he sighed and said, "You are being difficult, like always." Difficult. The word echoed in my head for hours. I thought about all the times I had been called that as a kid for crying when my mother forgot me somewhere, for complaining when she took my sister shopping and left me at home, for daring to ask why my birthday parties always seemed to get overshadowed by something more important. Difficult is what they call you when you stop letting them walk all over you. After that call, after the identity theft mess, after the job drama, after the birthday that was not really a birthday, I realized I was holding on to a life that was actively hurting us. My daughter started talking more about leaving, not just our neighborhood, but our entire city, maybe even the state. She wanted to apply to programs farther away, in places where my mother did not know anyone, where the family gossip web could not reach so easily. I wanted to laugh at how naive that sounded, but I also wanted to believe in it. I started looking at job postings in other branches of the company I worked for. I looked up rental prices in other cities, ran numbers on my phone late at night when my daughter was asleep. I went to see a lawyer at one point, mostly because I needed to know if there was anything I could do about the financial damage. Sitting in that office felt weird, like I was about to confess to a crime I did not commit. I told the lawyer about the store card, the address changes, the phone calls. She listened, took notes, and then gave me that look people give you when they are about to tell you something you are not going to like. She said the fraud was small, technically, depending on how the investigation went. She said proving my mother had done it without hard evidence would be nearly impossible. She said we could try to get the charges reversed, have the accounts closed, repair my credit, but going after my mother legally would be a long, expensive, emotionally draining process with no guaranteed outcome. I sat there and thought about spending years in court with the woman who had already taken so much from me, and I felt tired down to my bones, so I shifted focus. Instead of trying to make the world see what she had done, I decided to protect what I could. I called every company, every institution, every office I needed to, armed myself with passwords and security questions, locked everything down. I told my daughter to never give out her social security number to anyone, especially not family. I put alerts on my credit file. I reported what I could. I wrote everything down, dates, times, names of people I spoke with, in case I needed it someday. It was boring, unglamorous work, but it felt like building a fence around a small patch of land we could still call ours. It took about 4 months, but I got the fraudulent accounts closed and most of the charges reversed. My credit took a hit that will take years to fully repair, and no one could ever prove on paper who actually opened those accounts. But the timing told me everything I needed to know. I stopped waiting for a perfect piece of evidence and focused on making sure she could not do it again. While all this was going on, life refused to pause. My sister went into labor early. My mother sent a mass text that was basically, "Everyone pray, the baby is coming too soon." A few hours later, another message came through saying the baby had arrived and was in the nursery, small but strong. That was the first time in weeks my whole family group chat woke up again with excitement. Pictures started flooding in. My sister in a hospital bed, exhausted and glowing, my mother holding the baby like a trophy, relatives lined up to meet the new addition. My daughter and I sat on our couch and watched the entire thing unfold on our screens like we were viewing a show we had not been invited to. Somewhere in the flood of messages, My mother slipped in one specifically for me. It said, "I hope you are happy. All this stress you caused almost took my grandchild from me." That was the moment I realized she was never going to stop. In her mind, I was now responsible for everything that ever went wrong in that family. If the baby had been born late, it would have been my fault. If my sister cried once during pregnancy, it would have been my fault. She sent that text knowing I would carry it around like a stone in my chest if I let myself. I turned my phone off and told my daughter we were going out for ice cream, because I needed to do something normal before I exploded. We were not invited to meet the baby, by the way. Not at the hospital, not at home later. My mother posted pictures of 4 generations together online, even though I was very obviously missing from the photos. In one of them, I could tell by the angle that I had been there originally, standing at the edge of the frame at some older event, and she had cropped me out to make it look like it had always been them. That was a special kind of burn. My daughter saw it and said, "She is rewriting history." She was right. My mother was building a world where we barely existed, and everyone around her either went along with it or pretended not to notice. That was when my daughter started applying seriously to transfer programs and universities in other states. She spread brochures across our small kitchen table, filled out applications late into the night, wrote essays about resilience and challenge without ever using the word grandmother. I filled out forms for internal transfers at my job, reaching out to a branch in a different city that had an opening, even though it meant a lower position and a pay cut. We started quietly selling things we did not need, putting money aside, making plans. We did not tell anyone. We did not post anything. It felt like building a life in secret, which is funny when you think about how loudly my mother lived everything online. A few weeks before we were supposed to move, my sister showed up again. This time she had the baby with her, strapped into one of those carriers that makes them look even smaller than they are. She had dark circles under her eyes, hair half brushed, that look new parents get when they realize sleep is now a luxury. She said a relative had told her we were leaving and she could not let that happen without saying something. She did not call ahead. She just showed up, knocked, and stood there on my front step with tears already running down her face. We sat in my living room. The baby slept, making those little squeaky newborn noises that tug at something soft inside you no matter how hard you try to stay guarded. My sister held him like a shield and cried. She said she finally understood what it meant to have your child be the center of your world, and that the thought of someone doing to him what my mother had done to me and my daughter made her sick. She admitted she had let herself be used as a weapon against us for years, because it was easier than stepping out of the warm circle of favoritism. She said she was sorry, really sorry this time, not the kind of sorry you say because you got caught, but the kind that makes your whole body shake. She also said she could not leave, not yet. She depended on my mother's help, on the extra money, on the babysitting she had been promised, on the roof my mother kept over her head when her own choices fell apart. She said my mother had already told her that if she chose us, she would be on her own. She was not ready to risk that. Hearing her say that out loud hurt more than I expected. I understood it, and I hated it at the same time. I realized I could not drag her out of that house or that dynamic. She had to decide to walk out on her own, and maybe she never would. I held the baby once. He was light and warm and smelled like that mix of milk and baby lotion and something impossibly new. I looked at his tiny face and thought about my grandmother, my mother, me, my daughter, my sister, all these women and one little boy tangled up in this family web. I wanted better for him, but I also knew wanting is not enough. My sister left a while later, clutching him close, promising to call, to visit, to send updates. I walked her to the door and knew in my gut that whatever future relationship we had was going to happen on my terms this time, not on my mother's. My sister kept her promise in a strange, halfway kind of way. Every few months I get a photo of him, usually with a short caption like, "Thinking of you," or, "He asked about his cousin." No words about our mother, no explanations, just pictures of a little boy growing up in a house I used to know. I save them in a folder on my phone I do not show anyone. Maybe one day he will ask about me and she will tell him the truth. Maybe she will not. Either way, I hope he gets to be a kid without carrying anyone else's weight. Moving was not some magical escape. I wish I could say crossing state lines broke the spell and we woke up healed. In reality, it was a mess. The new branch of my job could only offer me a lower position. I took it anyway. We packed our lives into a rented truck, the smaller size, because I could not afford the bigger one. My daughter said goodbye to her friends, to a job at a small store she kind of liked, to streets she knew. We drove for hours to a city we had only seen in pictures and one quick visit for my interview. Our new apartment was smaller, farther from everything, with thin walls and old plumbing. It was ours, though. Ours in a way that no space near my mother's house had ever really been. The first few months were hard. I worked extra shifts when people called in sick, even when my back hurt and my feet felt like they were on fire. My daughter worked part-time at a coffee shop near her campus, coming home smelling like beans and pastries. We compared schedules at the beginning of each week, just to figure out when we could sit down together for an actual meal. Sometimes our dinners were just canned soup and toast, eaten at the counter between study sessions and laundry loads. It was exhausting. It was also, and I cannot believe I am saying this, peaceful in a weird way. There was no surprise knock on the door from my mother, no random drop-ins, no constant fear of running into her at the store. For a little while, it felt like we might really disappear from her radar. Months went by with only a few stray texts from relatives. We started building small routines, Saturday mornings at the park, Sunday afternoons doing laundry and half watching some show while folding clothes. My daughter made a couple of friends on campus. I learned the names of my new coworkers. It was simple and ordinary and so different from the constant emotional roller coaster of my old life that I almost did not trust it. Then, of course, the internet found us again. Or rather, my mother used it to reach into our new life. My daughter came home one day looking pale and angry in that particular way that means some awful thing has happened online. She shoved her phone at me and said, "Look." There it was, a profile on a social media app with her picture as the profile photo, taken from some older family event. The bio said things like, "Too busy for family but not for parties." And the posts were all ugly little quotes and comments about selfish children who abandon their elders. A few posts were clearly about me, about a mother who did everything and got stabbed in the back. But the profile itself was under my daughter's name. People from her university had found it. Some thought it was a joke, others did not. A girl from her class had commented something like, "This is so messed up. Why would you say that about your grandma?" My daughter had to explain that it was not her account, that someone was impersonating her. You would think that would be obviously believable. But people love drama. They love a villain in their immediate circle. A few believed her. A few did not. Either way, the damage was done. The doubt was in the air. We reported the profile, of course. We sent screenshots, filled out forms, waited for some invisible team to review it. The account would disappear for a while, then pop up again with a slightly different name or a new picture. It was like whack-a-mole with our sanity. My daughter started withdrawing. She stopped going out with her new friends. She skipped a couple of classes. She did not want to be in any photos anymore in case they got stolen. One night, she sat on her bed and said, "Maybe she is right. Maybe I am a bad granddaughter for leaving." My heart broke in a whole new way. Eventually, after months of reporting and blocking and screenshotting, the account stopped popping back up. Whether my mother got bored, got scared, or just found a new way to twist the knife, I will probably never know. All I know is that one day the fake posts went quiet, and that silence felt like breathing room. That was the point where I realized we were out of our depth emotionally. We could not just power through this like we had powered through everything else. We were both carrying so much shame and anger and confusion that it was bleeding into everything. So we found a therapist. Well, technically, my daughter found the therapist. She asked around on campus, got a recommendation, and then shoved the numbers into my hand, saying, "We need this. Both of us." I almost said we could not afford it. Then I thought about all the money I had spent trying to patch up the damage my mother kept causing and decided this was worth more than any of that. About 8 months after we moved, I ran into someone from the old neighborhood at a grocery store in our new city. Pure coincidence, terrible timing. She recognized me right away and came over smiling like we were old friends, and before I could even answer her small talk, she said she had heard about everything with your mom and that it must have been so hard for me. She meant it kindly, I could tell, but the way she said it made it obvious she only knew my mother's version. I told her I was running late and walked out with my cart half full, my hands shaking while I loaded bags into the trunk. It hit me that even hundreds of miles away, my mother's story about me had learned how to travel. Therapy was not some instant healing montage, obviously. The first few sessions were awkward. I am not used to talking about myself in front of strangers without making jokes or minimizing everything. My daughter sat next to me, arms crossed, answering questions with one word at first. The therapist was patient. She asked about our family history, our roles, our patterns. When we described my mother, the way she had always controlled the narrative, The way she used love and guilt interchangeably, the way she stepped into our lives even when we moved away. The therapist nodded like she had heard all of this before from other people with different names in different cities. At one point, she asked me, "What would it look like if your mother never apologized, never changed, never admitted anything, and you still had to build a life that felt peaceful?" I hated that question. I wanted the version where my mother eventually had some epiphany, maybe on a hospital bed or in a crisis, and suddenly realized how much she had hurt me. I wanted some grand confession, some public acknowledgement. I wanted her to post on her beloved social media app and say, "I lied about my daughter." The therapist gently told me that was unlikely. She said I had to decide if I wanted to spend the rest of my life waiting for something that might never come, or if I wanted to start building something inside myself that did not rely on my mother's approval. My daughter opened up more too. She talked about how she had grown up watching me shrink around my mother, how she had learned early that keeping the peace meant letting things slide. She admitted she sometimes resented me for not standing up for myself sooner, even though she also understood now how complicated it all was. Hearing that stung, but it was fair. I had taught her, unintentionally, that love meant tolerating whatever someone did to you as long as they were family. Now I was asking her to unlearn it at the same time I was trying to unlearn it myself. We did not walk out of therapy with a neat plan. What we did walk out with, slowly, over months, was a clearer sense of what we could control. We could control how much contact we had with my mother. We could control what information we gave her. We could control whether we engaged with her posts or messages. We could decide that not responding was not the same as losing. We could build routines and traditions that were just ours, even if they did not look like the big family gatherings my mother liked to post about. A year after we moved, things looked different. Not perfect, not healed, but different. My daughter finished her first year of college with grades so good she landed on some list for high achievers. She got a small internship in her field, unpaid but promising, and she was excited in a way I had not seen in a long time. I got a bit of recognition at work for a project I had taken on when someone else flaked. It was nothing huge, no promotion or anything, but my manager wrote an email to the whole team praising my work. It sounds silly, but seeing my name there attached to something good that had nothing to do with my mother felt like getting a new puzzle piece of myself back. We celebrated with takeout and a small cake from a bakery near our apartment. We lit a candle, just one, and wished for boring, steady days. My daughter laughed when I said that. She said, "You are the only person I know who wishes for boredom." And she is right. I do. Boredom sounds like safety to me now. During that little celebration, my phone buzzed on the table. I almost ignored it, but the preview of the notification caught my eye. It was a screenshot from a cousin. My mother had posted something again. I opened it, even though I knew I should not. It was an old picture from the birthday disaster night, edited to look soft and nostalgic. My mother and my sister, both smiling, my sister's stomach just starting to show. The caption talked about missing those days, about her broken heart over a family that used to be so close until bitterness came in. The comments were exactly what you would expect. People telling her she was strong, that she had done her best, that maybe one day her daughter would come back. Some of them were relatives I had once trusted with secrets. Some were women from church who had told me in person that they understood why I was taking space. I stared at the post for a long time. My daughter watched my face and asked softly, "Is it bad?" I showed it to her. She rolled her eyes and said, "She is doing her whole saint act again." Something inside me still hurt. That 15-year-old version of me who had wanted so badly for my mother to post one picture where I was actually in the center. But the hurt did not take over the way it used to. It sat there next to the part of me that knew my mother was never going to tell the truth, and somehow, for the first time, those two parts could exist at the same time without tearing me in half. The call from my father about my mother being sick came a few weeks after that. It was late in the evening. I was washing dishes, hands in soapy water, when my phone started buzzing. I dried one hand on a towel and checked the caller ID. Seeing his name still makes me feel like I am 9 years old, waiting to see if he will actually show up this time. He said hello, asked a couple of surface-level questions, and then jumped straight into the reason for the call. He said my mother had gotten some diagnosis, something that sounded serious, the kind of thing people whisper about in waiting rooms. He said the family was rallying around her, like they always do, bringing food, offering rides, posting on social media about strength and faith. Then he said, She wants to see you. She is hurt that you moved away. And now with this, she keeps saying she might not have much time. Everyone thinks it would mean a lot if you came back. You are the oldest. It is your responsibility. There it was. Responsibility. Duty. The unspoken rule that because I was born first, I had to absorb all the pain. He did not ask how I felt about it. He did not say he understood why I had pulled away. He did not acknowledge any of the things she had done. He went straight to, "You will regret it if you do not come." He said I should not let pride keep me from my mother's bedside. Pride. That word sat bitter on my tongue. Pride is what they call it when you finally grow a spine. My daughter was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, listening. She could hear every word because our apartment is too small for secrets. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting to see if I would fold. If I would say, "Okay, tell her I am coming," and book a ticket back to the place where I had spent most of my life shrinking. Part of me wanted to. Not because I suddenly believed my mother deserved my presence, but because the script was so familiar. I have spent my whole life saying yes when everything in me was screaming, no. Saying no felt like walking off a cliff. I asked my father one question. I said, "Did you tell her what she did to us?" There was a pause on the line, just long enough to feel like an answer. Then he said something vague about how now was not the time to rehash old wounds, that what mattered was that she was sick, and I was her daughter. He said if I did not come, the rest of the family would never understand. They would see me as cold, unforgiving, selfish. He listed all the roles I would fail at by staying away. Bad daughter, bad sister, bad example to my own child. I looked at the sink full of dishes, at the apartment we were slowly making a home out of, at my daughter's face. I thought about all the nights my mother had slept fine after making me feel like I was broken. I thought about my daughter crying because of that fake profile, about her humiliation at school, about the birthday party that was almost stolen. I thought about how walking back into my mother's house now, in this new role of comforting daughter, would mean stepping right back into the cage I had just barely managed to climb out of. So I said no, not dramatically, not with a speech. Just a simple, clear no. My father tried again, raised his voice a little, accused me of letting anger ruin everything. He said I was throwing away my chance at peace. I told him calmly that my peace did not require my mother's participation, that I hoped her treatment went well, that I did not wish her harm, but I was not coming back to play the part everyone had written for me. He was shocked. I could hear it in the silence that followed. Then he muttered something about me being impossible and hung up. He tried calling twice more over the next few weeks. I let both calls go to voicemail. In the second message, he sounded tired, almost small, and said he understood why I was doing this even if he did not agree. After that, silence. The silence felt like its own kind of answer. After I set the phone down, my hands were shaking so hard I had to lean on the counter. My daughter walked over, wrapping her arms around me. She said, "You really did it." I asked what she meant. She pulled back just enough to look me in the eye and said, "You broke the pattern. You chose us over them, over her." I did not feel brave. I felt like I might throw up. I also felt something new, like a tiny, stubborn seed of relief taking root somewhere deep inside my chest. I found out later, through a cousin who still messages me sometimes, that my mother's illness was serious but treatable. She went through her treatment surrounded by the people who were still willing to orbit her, and according to the photos that slipped through, she made a full recovery. In their version of the story, she survived in spite of the stress I caused, not because she had a whole room of willing helpers. By the time I heard that she was doing well, the narrative about me had already hardened into something ugly and dramatic, and I had no interest in correcting it for them. I know what my family will say about me now. They will tell the story of how my mother got sick and her oldest daughter never came. They will talk about me like I am some heartless villain who abandoned a dying woman. They will tell that version at every holiday, every church gathering, every coffee date, until it becomes the only truth they know. My mother will use it as proof that she was always the victim, never the instigator. My father will sigh and say he tried. My sister will stare at her plate and say nothing. What they will not tell anyone is that for years I chased my mother's love like it was air, and she held it just out of reach on purpose. They will not talk about the parties she ruined, the milestones she overshadowed, the secrets she spread. They will not mention the bills in my name she let pile up. They will not say how many times she called my job to complain or my daughter's school to stir things up. They will not admit that the woman they call strong and selfless used her power to crush the people who loved her whenever they stopped doing exactly what she wanted. But my daughter will know. I will know. When she has kids someday, if she chooses to, she will know what it looks like to set a boundary and mean it. Even when everyone calls you cruel. She will know that love does not mean letting someone destroy you over and over just because they share your blood. She will know that a family can be two people in a small apartment eating takeout and laughing about something stupid that happened at work and still be more honest and kind than a whole room full of relatives at a big holiday table. Sometimes, late at night, I still scroll through my mother's public posts. I watch her perform her pain for an audience that claps on cue. I see the comments about forgiveness and second chances and unconditional love and feel that old familiar pull. Then I look around at the quiet of our place, at the photos on our walls that we chose, at the calendar where we write down our own small plans. I remember that walking away from her was not about punishment. It was about survival. I used to think breaking the cycle would look like some grand gesture, a confrontation in front of everyone, a dramatic scene where I listed every terrible thing she had ever done, and she finally broke down and admitted it. Turns out it looked like packing boxes, signing a new lease, blocking a few numbers, going to therapy, telling my father no, and lighting a candle on a plain little cake in a back room no one else wanted. It looked like loving my daughter enough to let them call me difficult, ungrateful, cruel, if that is what it took to keep her from becoming me. If that makes me the villain in their version, fine. In mine, I am just a tired woman who finally stopped auditioning for a role that never should have existed in the first place. We did make our own little traditions, by the way. They are not fancy, but they are ours. On my daughter's next birthday after the disaster, we did not invite a single relative. We booked a tiny room at a community center in our new city and filled it with cheap decorations we picked out together. She invited classmates, a couple of friends from work, a neighbor from down the hall who always holds the door for her. We ordered too much food and bought a cake that actually said her name, spelled right, in bright icing. When we sang happy birthday, nobody was looking past her at someone else. Later that night, after everyone left and we were cleaning up, she said quietly, "I did not miss them." I believed her. I realized I had not missed them either. I missed the idea of family I never actually had. A few weeks after that birthday, my daughter told me about a conversation she had with a girl from her class. They were sitting in some drafty study room eating vending machine snacks when the girl said, "Your mom seems normal. If I told my mother I wanted to move this far away, she would have lost her mind." My daughter said she almost cried right there. Because for the first time, someone saw me as just a regular mom, not the difficult daughter or the family problem. Hearing that secondhand felt strange and good at the same time, like proof that outside our old bubble I was not automatically the villain. The difference now is that I am not there to hear it.